So I will not take you around the world. I will base us in the UK for now. And you, for better or for worse, you get to see me again because I presented for a colleague earlier today. In 2020, the UK became the world's first national health system to commit to net zero. My apologies for the slightly fuzzy slide. That was about decarbonizing the health sector, the NHS, National Health Service. In 2023, we launched a new centre within the UK Health Security Agency, the Centre for Climate and Health Security, and that's the centre that I lead. And so what we're aiming to do is have similar leadership and partnership, not only to minimize decarbonization, minimize warming or contributions to warming in the health sector, but also prepare for and get ready to respond to the implications of climate change. So we're locked in to some level of warming, and that will have implications for health. So my team leads really that health resilience, health preparedness side of the health system in the UK. So UKHSA, UK Health Security Agency, really covers three main areas. Now I should recognize there's a huge ecosystem of people and organizations and sectors and scales working on climate and health. And I'm just speaking about one, the national level within the UK Health Security Agency and the areas that we can contribute to or that we can lead on. And so the three areas that really are our core remit are around protecting health from threats associated with extreme and adverse weather, so heat waves, flooding, monitoring and prepare for and prevent and respond to vector-borne disease risks, primarily from ticks and mosquitoes, and strengthening the evidence base on climate risks to health. And these responsibilities flow directly from a number of commitments, primarily under the Climate Change Act and the National Adaptation Program, but also the Civil Contingencies Act. So we are a Category 1 responder to extreme weather threats for health, as well as a number of others. So commitments, the UK commitment through the Antimicrobial Resistance Plan and the National, what is the name of that exact, National Mosquito Surveillance Response? I have to check on the exact name of it, my apologies. So there's a number of legislative and regulatory commitments that really flow down into how UKHSA has this particular remit. It's quite formalized in the UK in that sense, particularly under the Climate Change Act. So we work closely with Greener NHS, who really leads on decarbonization. So my team and UKHSA doesn't work in the decarbonization space or net zero, except in the sense that the warmer it gets, the more severe the impacts that we will have to prepare for, and thinking about implications and potential co-benefits for health as we go through this transition to net zero. We also work with a range of other partners. I'm just going to mention a few of them, but as I said, there's a large ecosystem. So cross-government, many of the interventions, I mentioned this morning, many of the interventions that will help protect health from climate change lie outside of the health sector, so there's quite a bit of cross-government work. Working closely with local authorities who in many cases will actually be the ones that need to undertake implementation. And so our role is through provision of things like guidance and toolkits. And then private sector, academia, and civil society, particularly in the area of research, innovation, and broader partnerships. So some of the activities that we do, I'm not going to go into all of them, but I wanted to flag a few. The first is EPRR. So this is Emergency Preparedness and Response Functions. This is primarily related to what I was speaking about in terms of extreme weather. So we run, for example, the heat are the weather health alerts, so the heat alerts many of you will have seen last week, amber, yellow, red, our red alert 3 years ago, so we run that system. We also run national surveillance and monitoring for vector-borne disease across the country. So one of my teams is out collecting ticks, mosquitoes, trying to identify if we have invasive mosquitoes, for example. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then evidence generation and synthesis, so really pulling together evidence as it comes from the research community to package it for policy relevance. And there's also a number, there we go. There's also a number of other activities. I'm not going to go through them in detail, and I'll talk about them a little bit more. And this list is based on our theory of change about how we can have impact within this broader ecosystem. So we can't do everything, and you as a taxpayer wouldn't want us to try to do everything with your tax-paying money. And so it's really how can we be complementary, and where is leadership from us needed? And the core outcomes, again, this comes from our theory of change, of really what we should be doing and how that might have impact, are to guide policy development, so where there's potential for policy entry points, to catalyze partners at different levels, such as local authority, to be able to take action, so have sufficient information, toolkits, or guidance, to increase the climate health profile, so that's making sure that other parts of government are aware of how their decisions can affect health, and then having a shared vision. So what might a resilient health system look like? What I'm going to do is just highlight a couple of these areas. Firstly, vector-borne disease. I mentioned we have teams out there collecting ticks and mosquitoes. We recently, you may have seen on the news, detected West Nile virus for the first time in the UK. The success story really in this is that we found it in a mosquito, not a human. That means we found it early. And we had already worked with the local landowners in the local area, even before we detected the virus, because we knew that was a high-risk area. So we're constantly trying to identify invasive mosquitoes and sort of keep them out of the country. They're mosquitoes marching northwards and starting to enter the UK. Paris has had a number of summer dengue outbreaks, and that's certainly something at risk for London. Our extreme events and health protection team, incredibly busy with things like the heat wave. So they run, as I mentioned, these weather health alerts, but also a broader program under the Adverse Weather and Health Plan. And this provides, cascades a range of guidance to different sectors and for different settings related to extreme events. So some of the outputs, that center picture is from the technical document. So actually, this technical document will speak to some of the thresholds we use for our weather health alerts that we talked about this morning. And we also publish retrospective heat mortality reports and cold mortality reports under official statistics most recently. So some of the evidence synthesis work on the left-hand side is the Health Effects of Climate Change report from 2023, really summarizing and synthesizing the evidence on climate change. That infographic is from that report. Then on the right-hand side, we're moving towards special assessment reports. This is will be modeled on the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change special assessment reports, and the first one that will be coming out in October. And some of you, if you're cross-government or in this field, may have already had sort of an early view of it because it's gone out to different sectors for review, is a special focus on mental health. So look out for that, and that will be out. That'll be out in October, and we'll be working towards a series of high-priority special assessment reports. Digital products and services. We have a number, we're really working as a national agency. We can't be everywhere. We're really working to provide as many products and services accessibly in digital format where possible. On the left is our digital portal where we'll have links to as many resources as possible. We'll have the hard launch of that portal also probably in October. And on the right are just some examples of some of the outputs we have, some of the guidance toolkits. Just an FYI, you can send us your ticks when you find a tick, or if you find an interesting looking mosquito, there actually is a reporting scheme. You can send it to us, or even be a regular tick surveillance person who will capture them. We have people volunteers across the country that support this work. There's just piles of ticks and all these strange envelopes in the. Some of them don't survive the mail system as well as others, depending on how you package them. Where I'd like to end, though, is really on this concept of a vision and developing and really, co-developing a shared vision for what good looks like. What we found when working with different partners is we have a lot of ideas of what bad looks like, all of these scenarios that we can model. But what very few of us have is a vision of what good might look like. And so this is something we're really looking to develop with partners. And some of the sort of guiding principles that I wanted to flag around the work that we do, because it can be a little bit soul-destroying working in this field for some of our staff and possibly some of you in the audience. So some of our guiding principles, I mentioned this morning, we are policy relevant but not prescriptive. It's very important to walk that fine line for us in the role that we play. We are evidence-based, but with a really strong emphasis on confidence assessment. So our policy partners need to know, are you really confident? Are you only a little bit confident? Maybe this looks like a fantastic option, but there's a lot of uncertainty around it. So again, this is something we're borrowing from the IPCC assessment process, which is integrating formal, systematic confidence assessment in much of the work that we do. It's not well done, I would say, in the non-quantitative research literature. So it's an area we're really working on. I would say moving from paralysis to pragmatism, the stuff we do should be business as usual. We want to get to a place where integrating health thinking and climate thinking into the work that we do is not exceptional, where we don't need a summit, where this is business as usual. So trying to take a really pragmatic approach to all of the work that we do. Looking for health opportunities and co-benefits. There are a huge number of opportunities for benefits to health from decarbonization trajectories. There are also some risks. One of them is greening strategies, creating new habitat for mosquitoes, invasive mosquitoes, for example. But by and large, we're quite lucky because there are a number of interventions that provide win-win for health, for adaptation, and for mitigation. And so focusing on those positives and really narrowing in sort of our intervention emphasis on areas where action can be positive for health, climate, and in many cases for the economy as well. And ultimately, a sense of optimism moving forward. So a vision for an optimistic future. And this picture here is an extract from the most recent IPCC assessment report 6, summary for policymakers. And so these sort of visuals, we want to use visuals, we want to create pictures in our minds among our partners that are these positive views of what the future could look like, and not just have scenarios of doom. So I will end there, and I look forward to any questions.
Okay, I am looking forward to packaging up my next tick and sending it to you in an envelope. Okay, you don't make the policy, but you provide the evidence to the government, who then makes the policy. So let's just dive straight in. What are the biggest challenges in getting that evidence translated into policy and therefore action, the kind of business as usual you just mentioned?
I think there's a really huge gap between research and science and evidence and what policymakers, which is a bit of a generic term to use, need. And I think in many cases we're not packaging the evidence in a way that's meaningful. I'll provide you with an example. When we published our Health Effects of Climate Change report, we did modeling, excellent scientific, robust modeling, that said that West Nile virus was unlikely to be a major risk for several decades in the UK, would not be a problem in the UK. When we detected West Nile virus over the last, I guess it was last month, some of our colleagues said to us, you were wrong. West Nile virus was found. It is an issue. And really what we hadn't done is package that science, which wasn't wrong, just wasn't packaged appropriately. Really what we needed for our partners was to say, here's the sort of time range that we might expect to detect this virus for the first time in mosquitoes. And here's the time range where we might expect for this virus to be established in mosquito populations. Here's the time range where we might detect our first human case. And here's the time range, several decades down the road perhaps, with really wide uncertainty, that we might expect there to be risk of outbreaks, sustained outbreaks. That's the type of information, that's the translation of what was really good science and modeling into something meaningful for policy. So I think that's a really good example of how we need people and expertise and sort of appropriate translation such that we can get the science communicated in a way that that makes sense for people making those decisions.
You have a whole audience here of researchers, clinicians, people from organisations who are absolutely committed to climate and health. I'm sure they want to know what their role is, very briefly, and then we've got time for a very short couple of questions.
I mean, everyone has a different role, right? I mean, we need scientists and we need people that do advocacy. The gentleman at the back that was talking about advocacy, and we need people in government. I think that it's that pluralism that really makes this work, right? And the more that we can connect across our different representations and sectors. So I don't have a more specific answer than that, really.
Okay, well, please put your hands up in the audience here if you want to pick her brains whilst we've got her. Any questions from the audience just now? Whilst you're thinking of them, I'll ask you another one. There's
a question, actually.
Oh, there is? Very subtle hand up. Oh, great.
Hi. I haven't heard the word disabled people mentioned once in the conference today. As we know, they're the most affected by climate change, the least consulted, and some green policies exclude them completely. And some green policies that try to mitigate, for example, air pollution by forcing people to give up their petrol cars, mean that blue badge holders and disabled drivers suffer even a worse exclusion from helpful mitigations than they already do in terms of the health effects that they also endure. So as 1/4 of the world's population, it would be just great to hear a little bit about how people with acquired or congenital disabilities figure in your work.
I mean, it's such a good question, and I think you're absolutely right. It was actually 3 years ago this week that my son, who has autism, was in London for a school trip during the heat wave, and his medicine and his disabilities meant he was vomiting throughout the night. So there's sort of a visceral sense, certainly for me, that people are differentially vulnerable. We know that. I think there's a focus, I think appropriately, on older people in social care, simply because that's where the volume of burden is. So I think national government, I think we do tend to focus really where the greatest burden is, the greatest number of people. And I think that that's justified. But you're right that alongside that, there are other areas of equity that don't get as much voice. And people with disabilities, congenital conditions, do fall into that category because numbers tend to be small and experiences tend to be so unique. So the people with disabilities are not homogenous. In fact, they're incredibly heterogeneous, and that makes looking at individual support and interventions very, very difficult. So we look at vulnerable populations across the whole spectrum of core 20 plus. So I think that we could do better.
Let's sneak in one hand very briefly. Thank you.
Hi. We've heard an awful lot about, again and again, we hear about product-focused solutions in terms of climate change and moving forward within the built environment. For instance, air conditioning or heat pumps or solar energy or stuff. IPCC's moved on from that. They're not talking about energy efficiency, which is rather 20th century. They're talking about energy sufficiency in the built environment. So we have one solution which purges pathogens from hospitals, which reduces carbon emissions from buildings, which means that buildings don't fail when the grid fails. And that's opening windows. So why are actual passive solutions not at the forefront of the way we practically solve a lot of these complex problems?
So actually our recommendations do strongly recommend passive solutions before taking on things like air conditioning, because there's huge gains to be had. I think opening windows isn't an easy solution in all cases. So sometimes you want to close the windows because the temperature outside is warmer. And in some cases, people are living on ground floor and it's not safe. In a care home, people with dementia, you actually might not want to open windows because of safety risk for the people themselves. So there's actually air pollution challenges, which is why you don't want, it's not fresh air that would come in. So we do have a number of scenarios where opening windows doesn't work. But yeah, absolutely our recommendations are not just roll out air conditioning. I agree, passive solutions can help a huge amount. And we saw some great examples of changing in roofing, for example. So there are a lot of options, of which opening windows when it's cooler outside, especially in the evening, so closing windows during a hot day and opening them at night if it gets cooler, that just being really smart with our windows, basically, right? Knowing, people often ask me, what do you do during a heat wave? And I say, I really work with my windows. I know when to open them. I know when to close them. I pay a lot of attention to how the temperature differs inside and outside. So windows are important.